Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. UFC Vegas 45 just ended. The main event was Derrick Lewis versus Chris Daukaus, and this is going to be my post-fight. I'm going to talk about multiple fights on the main card. I'm mainly going to talk about the main and co-main event, but I'll briefly go over the main card. If you join me for the live stream, I appreciate you very much. This is the last fight of 2021, the last UFC fight card of 2021. And it was a very solid card, lots of finishes. The main event was super entertaining for as long as it lasted. And let's talk about the main event. Derrick Lewis wins via KO in the first round. This was my exact prediction. I thought Derrick Lewis was going to win this fight. I thought that Chris Daukaus was a very solid, well-rounded fighter, especially for the heavyweight division. But his entries were super sloppy, and that Derrick Lewis's nuclear power would eventually land on Chris Daukaus' chin, and he would put him to sleep. For the year, the official predictions for the year, I've only tracked title fights and main events. So, it is what it is. I'm just telling you my official prediction record. 30-11 for main events in 2021 and 14-6 for title fights. I can't wait for 2022. Let's talk about the finish. So, Derrick Lewis, he gets the finish. I think it's the last minute and a half of the first round. And the fight was going rather well for Chris Daukaus, but it's always going well for every fighter who fights Derrick Lewis up until it's not going well anymore. And we've seen that happen plenty of times. Curtis Blaydes dominates the entire first round. Then Derrick Lewis just absolutely sleeps him in the beginning of the second round with a brutal uppercut. And this tends to happen. Volkov wins two and a half or 2 3/4 rounds, and Derrick Lewis knocks him out in like the last 10 seconds of the third round. So this happens time and time again. You can do well against Derrick Lewis, but that speed and nuclear power is just unbelievable, and he just wins time and time again. There's been plenty of times where I've picked against Derrick Lewis. I picked against him with Ciryl Gane. I picked against him in the Volkov fight. I picked against him in the Curtis Blaydes fight earlier this year, and he just perpetually proves me wrong. And when I looked at this fight, I saw Chris Daukaus as the overall better fighter, but I knew those entries, this little bit of a sloppy striking, leaving the chin out there, the speed of Derrick Lewis, combined with the nuclear power, I knew Derrick Lewis was going to get this win. I thought he would KO him in the first round. But the fight started off rather well. For the first minute or so, neither guy really threw a strike. Chris Daukaus was kind of just moving around the cage. Then he started to throw heavy leg kicks on Derrick Lewis. And it really started to look, if Chris Daukaus can keep this up, keep moving around the cage, keep kicking the leg of Derrick Lewis, try to take away that power, if he takes away that lead leg. And we've seen guys do that to him before. Ciryl Gane absolutely brutalized Derrick Lewis's leg, eventually finishes him later in the fight. And so I thought, okay, if Chris Daukaus can keep this up, this is really good for him. But sure enough, Derrick Lewis starts to kind of plot forward a little bit, and he was cutting off the cage very well. And at the apex, we have the much smaller cage, which I personally hate because I want as much movement as possible. So I hate the smaller cage at the apex. And also I feel like they shouldn't be changing the cage size per event. I think that's stupid, but that's a whole nother video idea. Derrick Lewis starts plotting forward. He rushes forward. Like always, he likes to blitz. Up until this point, up until the finish, Derrick Lewis maybe threw, I want to say like 5 strikes, because he threw a jumping kick at one point. And Derrick Lewis's kicks are lightning fast too. That was blocked by Chris Daukaus. But Derrick Lewis is cutting off the cage. He's not following him. Cuts off the cage. Starts just unloading on Chris Daukaus. Hurts him badly. Chris Daukaus starts to back up against the cage. Derrick Lewis is just flurrying shots. Hurts him. Then eventually Chris Daukaus just grabs in the clinch. And at this point, it's looking like Chris Daukaus is going to survive this early flurry. And then Chris Daukaus, while in the clinch, starts throwing back and landing on Derrick Lewis. Well, meanwhile, Derrick Lewis has like that half Muay Thai clinch where he's got the hand directly behind Chris Daukaus' neck, pulling on the head, then starts throwing the right hand over and over again. DC used the same technique when he KO'd Stipe Miocic in the first fight between them two at heavyweight. And Derrick Lewis just unloads, lands nasty shots, and KOs Chris Daukaus. Chris Daukaus just falls to the ground, completely unconscious. Referee Mark Smith, I'm always complaining about the quality of Mark Smith's reffing skills. Great stoppage. There was no unnecessary ground and pound. He gave Chris Daukaus every chance to fight back, even though he was rocked multiple times. And Derrick Lewis defies MMA logic again, and that's exactly why I picked him. He doesn't have the greatest wrestling. He doesn't have the greatest cardio. But somehow he's able to land that punch. I've talked about it time and time again. Derrick Lewis's 3 best skills are his speed, his power and his timing. He has great timing. He finds the moments when these guys are kind of not expecting it, and he just blitzes forward. And when you throw all these punches, one is bound to land. And that's also why I picked him in this fight. He had 15 minutes to land one punch, and he found it, and he landed a bunch of punches. And Chris Daukaus, this would have been a big win for him. Unfortunately, he doesn't get it. I don't know where Derrick Lewis goes from here. He's kind of in a weird spot. Post-fight interview. And also, let me bring this up, even though this is totally irrelevant. Derrick Lewis takes off his dirty, sweaty cup and throws it into the crowd, and a guy runs down there and picks it up. That guy should be embarrassed. His family should be ashamed of him. Who does that? And I mean, Derrick Lewis, that's weird for him to do it, but nobody should have picked that up. That guy took that back to the bleachers and stuck it in his pocket. What are we doing here? Disgusting, totally irrelevant to MMA, but had to mention it. I don't know where Derrick Lewis goes from here. He says he doesn't want 5-round fights. He has no chance against Ciryl Gane, in my opinion. He could win a fight against Francis Ngannou. He's beat him before. And the power of Derrick Lewis, if he can find your chin, he can KO any man on the heavyweight roster. Francis Ngannou, not a super technical striker, not going to pick you apart from the outside. So Derrick Lewis always has a chance to beat Francis Ngannou, but I just don't believe he's beaten Ciryl Gane. I would love to see Derrick Lewis welcome John Jones to the division. That would be super fun. Could you imagine the tension there? Could you imagine the consensus greatest of all time light heavyweight, who's everyone wanted for years to move up to heavyweight, fighting Derrick Lewis in his debut? That would be amazing. But other than that, I mean, it's really hard for me to pick out an opponent for him. I have to look at it a little closer. He's fought a lot of guys, and he's not really close to a title shot. Chris Daukaus is kind of a weird win because I don't even think he's ranked in the top 10. This was a big fight. I guess they just really needed a main event for this card. But again, Derrick Lewis just does it again with the power and speed, gets the win, and the guy just defies all MMA logic. Moving on to the co-main event. And my picks were absolutely awful. So I did 3 official predictions for this card. I did a Carlos Diego Ferreira versus Mateusz Gamrot prediction. And I also did a Wonderboy Thompson versus Belal Muhammad prediction. And Wonderboy goes out there and gets dominated. Belal Muhammad wins by decision. And I think within this fight, something that's going to, the narrative behind Belal Muhammad is going to be very unfair to Belal Muhammad. I did it myself on the live stream. And I believe, that's partially true, but at the same time, give the guy his credit. He went out there and dominated Wonderboy. Wonderboy's getting older, and a lot of people are going to write this off as Wonderboy falling off a cliff. And that may or may not be true, but Wonderboy still has great striking. He was able to clip Belal up, but for the majority of the fight, it was Belal spamming takedowns, getting him down, and being able to cement the position. At one point, he had his back, had Wonderboy flattened out, throwing heavy shots. Herb Dean didn't even care about it at one point. Then Wonderboy got to his knees. Belal started really just throwing arm punches there, so I kind of understood Herb not stepping in there. But for the most part, Belal went out there, took Wonderboy down, clinched him up, double-legged him, single-legged him, took him down, controlled him on the ground, and beat him up. And Wonderboy had no answer for it. He went out there, and he accepted the position at every turn. He just had no defense for it. And Belal should get some credit. Wonderboy used to have really good takedown defense. And I guess you could still consider he has decent, I guess. But Belal Muhammad went out there and dominated him. Very similar to Gilbert Burns. I don't believe by any means that Belal Muhammad deserves a title shot. He called for an Usman fight after the fight. I think that's a joke. I think he needs at least one more solid win just because of where Wonderboy's at in his career. But it's time that people give him credit. I was way off on this pick. I thought that Belal would get outstruck brutally and lose the fight. And in the striking exchanges, Wonderboy was winning those exchanges, but they only lasted for 10 seconds at a time because Belal was already shooting in on a takedown or already clinching up with him and taking him down. He was threatening with submissions. He was landing decent ground and pound. And usually Belal, I've always said he's kind of boring. It seems like he's not going for the finish. He was going for the finish throughout this fight. He was beating up Wonderboy badly. I think one judge gave it to him 30-25, so I think that's multiple 10-8 rounds. I think the other judges gave him 30-26, so that's at least one 10-8 round in my opinion. At least I think that's the way it is. Wonderboy, I don't know where he goes. Wonderboy's getting up there. He's at an advanced age. He looks slower. The striking still looks good, but he cannot stuff a takedown to save his life. And when you look at the welterweight division, the layout of the welterweight division, You have Khamzat Chimaev, who's a great grappler. You have Usman, who's a great grappler. You have Colby Covington, who's a great grappler. You have Chiesa, who's a good grappler. You have Belal Muhammad, who's a good grappler. The welterweight division is probably the division with the most amount of elite grapplers. I don't understand how Wonderboy's ever going to be successful again. And especially at the apex, where he doesn't have as much room, to use his footwork and move around. He had some moments in this fight, landed some decent strikes. He fought back to his feet at one time in the third round, which I did not think he had the energy to, because the majority of the fight, he was just accepting the position. So let's move down the card a little bit. I just really don't want to spend too much time on it. I want to get this post-fight reaction out really quick. By the way, guys, if you haven't subscribed, do me a favor. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Amanda Lemos versus Angela Hill. Great first round. Lemos hurts her badly with a front kick. Hill recovers, is able to win, like the last minute of the round or so, minute and a half. But I definitely gave the first round to Lemos. Then the second round, a lot of just swinging at air, nothing really happening. I don't care who gets that round. You could give it to anyone. Third round, clearly Angela Hill. Amanda Lemos got the decision. I have no problem with it. Some people were calling it a robbery. I did not think it was a robbery. Second round was terrible. I could have had, either girl could have lost this fight. Angela Hill is now 13-11. She does a lot of swinging and missing. She threw one of the worst front kicks I've ever seen in my life within this fight from about 15 feet away. It wasn't even close. So I really don't care, too much about where either one of these girls goes from here. I don't think Amanda Lemos is going to challenge for a title, but who knows? You never know. Strawweight division is deep. It's not like the flyweight. It's not like the bantamweight and featherweight women's divisions. Strawweight is deep, so it's going to be a while before she gets to a title. Cardio looked a little suspicious tonight. She lost the third round to Angela Hill, won the first, and then the second, really nothing happening. Raphael Assunção versus Ricky Simón moving down the card. I picked Raphael Assunção in this fight, but he has just absolutely fallen off a cliff. Ricky Simón KOs him in the second round and dominated him up until that point. Very impressive performance by Ricky Simón. That's a solid win against a ranked competitor, and he calls out Sean O'Malley afterwards, and I would love to see that fight. Normally, the UFC doesn't like to take two guys on the rise and match them up, but with the depth of the bantamweight division, I think it makes perfect sense. It doesn't matter if we kill off a contender because there's so many elite guys in the bantamweight division. But honestly, the way the UFC is trying to build Sean O'Malley into a star, I don't see him making this fight. They're not going to touch this fight with a 10-foot pole. We already seen what happened when Sean O'Malley fought Marlon Vera. He got his leg kicked out from underneath of him, then flash KO'd with elbows, and then he was stretchered out of the cage. I don't think they want to take that risk again. I think they're going to give Sean O'Malley another very winnable matchup, but somebody in the rankings, maybe like Frankie Edgar. I hope it's somebody a little bit more competitive than that. But I think Ricky Simón, with his pressure style, his good takedowns, and the fact that he finished this fight on the feet and knocked out Raphael Assunção out cold with the hands, I just don't think the UFC wants this matchup. And Ricky Simón even said as much. In one of my videos on the channel, I talked about it. Ricky Simón offered to step in on short notice at UFC 264 to fight Sean O'Malley. And Sean O'Malley said on his podcast that Dana White did not want that fight. That Sean said, I would fight him, but Dana White did not want that fight. And I think that's a nightmare matchup for Sean. But I think it'll be a very fun fight, and I think either guy could win that fight. I'm not even saying necessarily I pick Ricky Simón, but I think he's a nightmare matchup. Moving down the card, Carlos Diego Ferreira versus Mateusz Gamrot. Great fight. So many scrambles, even striking. First round could have went either way. Gamrot probably took it with his takedowns. Second round, there's a scramble. Gamrot has his back against the cage. Diego's down on one knee, and Gamrot throws a nasty knee to the ribs. Hurt Diego. He taps out. Gamrot's a little bit confused, goes for a rear naked. The ref finally jumps in and stops it, but it was a TKO from a body shot to the ribs with the knee. It was perfectly placed. A lot of people thought the stoppage was weird, myself included, but it's a legitimate win for Gamrot. So it's a nice, solid win over Diego Ferreira, who I believe is a very high-quality opponent who doesn't get enough respect. So I can't wait to see where Gamrot goes from here. Very interesting prospect within the lightweight division. Last fight I'm going to talk about on the main card, Cub Swanson versus Darren Elkins. Cub Swanson goes out there and just absolutely styles on Darren Elkins, finishes him in the first round, hurts him badly with the hands, has the hands down at the hips. Darren Elkins shelling up pretty well, lands a couple right hands in the first round, but Cubs just absolutely lands brutal shots, massive right hands. Eventually throws a spinning wheel kick that didn't really land too much, but it stumbled Darren Elkins because he was already out on his feet. Ref jumps in and stops it. It's good to see a great guy like Cub Swanson get a good win like that against Darren Elkins. I'm happy for him. And overall, this was a great card. I mean, literally only 2 decisions on the entire main card. So 4 out of 6 fights on the main card went to or were finished. But great card, last fight card of the year. It sucks. Now we got a month break. So I'll be doing a bunch of videos during that break, like top 5 submissions of the year, my personal favorites, top 5 fights of the year, top 5 knockouts of the years. And if you guys have any suggestions on videos you want me to do in this month break, just leave them in the comments. Don't forget to like this video. This was my UFC Vegas 45 post-fight reaction. Thank you so much for watching.